Okay, so as I said, managing sustainable energy finance project with IFC for the last 5 years. We do development of energy efficiency and renewable energy financing in Armenia. It is mostly through intermediary financial institutions because the projects themselves are too small for direct financing from IFC. So we have a couple of clients with us who do renewable and energy efficiency financing with the renewables. It's Armenia Bank, which has 15 million loan, senior loan from IFC, and they're investing in renewables, in small hydros. They have so far financed 12 hydropower projects with total capacity of around 40 megawatt. So it's a pretty good portfolio we have with this bank. Today I'll be touching on this main content of my presentation, which is a brief overview of the small hydropower technology, the milestones of its development in Armenia, and also the dynamics of the development. Then we'll go to risk management issues at a small hydropower plant. So, what is a small hydropower plant? The definition varies from country to country. Till very recent in Armenia it was up to 10 megawatt of installed capacity. Recently the government has changed it up to 30 megawatt. Usually the rule of thumb is up to 10 megawatt worldwide, except for Georgia, which is the most unique case in the world. They have 13 megawatt cap for small hydros, which is crazy.
I'm sorry, Armenia now is 30 is considered
30. Yes.
So,
So there are three types of small hydropower plants that can be built in Armenia. It's run-of-river, so based on a river flow, a power plant which is built on irrigation system, and also plants that are built on the drinking water pipeline system. So for the river type, there can be two types: run-of-the-river, which doesn't use dams, and also storages. Storages are considered the dams that you build to have water supply for running your hydropower. We don't do that. It is referring to the higher capacity hydropower plants. So in Armenia, we do run-of-the-river. Depending on the hydraulic head, you can say there is high head, which is above 100 meters, and medium head 30 to 100 meter, and low head less than 30 meter. Usually in Armenia, small hydros are low head, run-of-the-river hydropower plants, up to 10 megawatt capacity. This is the formula for calculating the installed capacity of a hydropower plant. The main figures here are the water flow, Q, which is measured in cubic meters of water, and also the height, the head, which is the difference between the forebay and the powerhouse X. I mean, this is the axis of the turbine basically. So this is the head. This is the penstock, which creates the hydraulic pressure for running the turbine. Okay. These are the main structures of a small hydropower plant. The head works. This is basically the water intake, the place where you take the water from the river to divert it to your powerhouse. It consists of a weir or a dam, which is a small thing, just this. In Armenia, it's less than 30 meters, so it's low head. No dam, basically. Water intake is this part, where you take the water from the river and divert it to your hydropower plant. The trash rack and the sand trap are here. The trash rack is basically a rack that eliminates the large pieces of trash from the water, so that those do not go to the turbine, which can damage the turbine. It will be a huge loss for the power plant. It's a rack like this. The sand trap is a construction here. The idea of a sand trap is that you eliminate the sand from the water before it goes to the hydropower plant. And here they have an outlet, so the water goes through here, sand settles here, yes, and then you wash it out. The water that goes to hydropower plant is more or less sand-free afterwards. But this is the very basic structure, the only that is used in Armenia. Then, of course, one of the most important parts of a water intake is the fish bypass, which is very important because you have to preserve the natural kind of flora and fauna. So this is this part on this particular water intake. The idea is that the fish has to go up and down the stream, and your hydropower plant is not supposed to harm the natural processes. So that's why the fish bypass is being built, constructed. One can argue about building good or bad fish bypasses, whether there is a necessity of building the fish bypass at all or not. In Armenia, it is mandatory to build a fish bypass. In other countries, for example in England, it depends on the river condition, on the quantity and the type of the fish that is inhibiting the river or not. In Armenia, it's mandatory. The waterway is the way that conveys the water from the intake to the powerhouse. It consists of the head race. I don't have it here. It's basically this part. It's an open channel which goes up to the forebay. And from the forebay, you have the penstock, which is this part. It's a pipe. It's a metallic or I don't know GRP pipe, which creates the pressure necessary to run the turbine with the air. Then the powerhouse itself, which holds the turbine and the generator, and then the tail race, which discharges the used water back to the river after going through the turbine. Okay.
There's no pollution that happens as it goes through the
No.
powerhouse, right?
Mainly, there is no pollution. The only pollution that can come up is due to construction processes that is changing the terrain, creating some construction garbage, etc., which is mandatory to be eliminated from the project site, and the project site has to be reconstructed according to the requirement of the environmental impact assessment. So the project developer has to build, to plant trees, etc., etc. Okay? So these are the key milestones of small hydropower development in Armenia. It all started in 1997 with the energy law. In 2001 it was modified, and there came this 15 years guaranteed purchase of 100% of generated energy from a renewable power source. This was one of the major pillars of developing renewables in Armenia, because this creates a 15 years guaranteed market. So the developer has not to worry about market or who is going to be the off-taker. It's being off-taken 100%. Okay? The next milestone was this introduction of a preferential feed-in tariff for renewable energy. In 2007, the Public Service Regulatory Commission established this formula with a baseline. At that time, it was around 17 drams. Later on, it was changing. It was at 18 drams for run of the river. And then it was changing. This change is due to these coefficients and the CPI and exchange rate of USD towards Armenian dram. Basically, the tariff is being recalculated every year based on the inflation and the exchange rate of Armenian dram. This is in order to take into account the loan services by the developers, because around 35 to 40% of the investment of the capex in developing hydropower plant is the turbine and generator itself. When putting this exchange rate with 35% weight on it, the idea was that 35% of the investment is for the turbine and generator, which is being imported. So they wanted to hedge the exchange currency risk in the tariff formula. That is the idea of having the exchange risk here. The inflation, it is again with 35% weight put on it. The idea is to cover operation and maintenance costs and taking into account the inflation in those. Okay? And this is the only 30% of the fixed part of the feed-in tariff, which is not changing any year. During these past years, the tariff behaved like this. After the crisis with the dollar going up, the tariff started to increase gradually. For 2014, we have 21 drams for kilowatt hour produced on a run-of-the-river small hydropower plant. This is for irrigation channel, this is for water pipeline. The idea that the tariffs for these two are lower is that with irrigation you already have the channel with the water in it, so construction costs are much lower than you would need for run-of-the-river. And for drinking water is even less, because you have the pipe. It's very easy from the engineering perspective. You just cut the pipe, take a part of it out, and put a capsule generator. It's like another pipe, but it has the generator in it. So the water just goes through it and generates energy. That's why it's the cheapest hydropower tariff. By the way, if you have questions, you can ask. Don't wait for the answer.
Do we have the drinking water pipeline in Armenia?
One or two. Yeah, it's not that easy to get the okay from the water utility. And also the capacities are very small, so it's not industrial level anyway. Okay? These are the milestones of development of small hydros in terms of financing. It all started in 2006 or 2004, I would say, with the introduction of the KfW project. KfW is the German Development Bank. They have started this project of financing renewables in Armenia with the state entity German Armenian Fund, which is operating under the Central Bank of Armenia. In 2004, KfW put 6 million euros for development of small hydros. They have hired a very qualified technical engineer and financial consultant. At that time, it was Lamar International, which is one of the most renowned engineering companies in the world. And then in 2010, they put another 18 million euros for renewables. Now it's 40 million, which is already starting to be disbursed to the project developers. This is the best resource we have in Armenia because these guys are providing financing through the central bank guarantee. It is 10.5% interest, annual interest in local currency for 12 years. It's the best you can find. You can't even find a mortgage like that.
But hold on, how much do we borrow it from the Germans?
Armenia borrows it from the Germans for like 1% or something.
It's subsidized loan.
Yeah, it's very much subsidized. It's a state loan. Sovereign. Then it was Cascade Credit, which in 2006 they've established this renewable energy financing facility with Cascade Credit. World Bank put money in it, EBRD put money in it, and also Cafeșa himself through the Cascade Credit put some money in the pot. It was around 15 million. Yes, 15 million, and they have financed 22 small hydros with that money. It's a revolving fund. Money comes back with the payments from the developers, and it's being again landed to the next developer. In 2010, with the help of IFC, Yerevan started to finance small hydros. We gave the bank a senior loan of 15 million, and they have financed 12 small hydros as of today. These are the three main financing facilities that we have in Armenia. The rest are through local banks, which are very subjective in their choice of projects, and it's not that cost-effective to work with them. This is a snapshot of the small hydros development dynamics. As you can see, in 2004 we had only 28 operational and 6 under construction. Today we have around 140 with 220 megawatt installed capacity and 650 gigawatt hour per year generation. There is another 77 small hydros which are under construction, meaning they have construction license on hand. It's not necessarily that they are now constructing the power plant. They have construction license on their hand. There is another around 100 potential sites according to the Renewable Energy Roadmap, which was developed a couple of years by the Renewable Resources and Energy Efficiency Fund. But those are technical sites with technical potential for small hydro development. It's not necessarily going to happen because all the good project sites were already taken and developed long ago. Now these 77, for example, they're facing issues with the increased capex because the projects are harder to develop. They need more investment, which is not very much feasible under the existing feed-in tariff because it was not designed for these more expensive small hydros. This is in a nutshell about small hydros in Armenia. So let's get to risk management of small hydros. It all starts with the classic risk management approach. Evaluation, mitigation. In order to be able to manage your risk, you have to find those and understand what are the main drivers of those risks, what are the consequences, the cost for it, etc. So I have to go through these three stages. First step, identification. During project appraisal process, it covers technical, environmental, social, legal, commercial risks. Basically everything you can think of has to be covered in your risk identification process. Country-specific risks, e.g. political risks, are not considered in this manual because it's not there right now. In Armenia we don't have that because it's according to the law. No political risk there, basically. Second step is evaluation of risks. You have to evaluate the risks with the help of a financial model. You have to have a technical engineer who will do the independent due diligence of your project, etc., etc. And then the third step will be measures to be undertaken in order to mitigate those risks. Project risks have to be continuously reassessed in the course of the construction and operation process. In Armenia, unfortunately, project developers, we all Armenians will think that we know best of everybody else, right? What we are doing. And every project developer is the best constructor in the world, of course. So they don't do risk management at all, basically. It's all based on ad hoc decision making. Okay, I'm having an issue today, I will solve it today, and I don't think about tomorrow, and I don't think about yesterday at all. Just forget. But that's not right. That's the main issue that we are facing with the developers, because I'll tell you some crazy things that are happening now. The risk assessment. When you are identifying the risk, after that you have to give a level of importance for each risk in order to figure out the priority of the risk mitigation technique and the approach that you're going to use. So basically it is recommended to quantify the potential losses from each risk and the probability of their occurrence. This is a theoretical, very nice statement, but in reality it's not that easy to quantify the risks. So you have to try hard with the help of your engineer, of your financial person, to understand, evaluate and quantify the most you can, basically. The better you do quantification, the better for you, basically.
This is also where experience counts. The experience.
Certainly. And when we refer to Armenia, practically I can say that there is no, or maybe one or two developers that have any clue about hydropower in Armenia. Vast majority of the developers in Armenia, they are not affiliated with hydropower or energy at all. They see this as a good business opportunity, which one can understand because they have 15-year guaranteed market with a preferential offtake price, which is nice. And that's a very important and hard topic for Armenia, because when they don't know about the subject matter, they don't take enough time and they don't want to invest much into doing all these risk mitigation processes and assessment. They think that everything will fly, they just need to hire an engineering firm, hire a construction company, they will do it and everything will be running smoothly. That's not the case at all. Especially with the design, we have this common notion among the designers. I've been working with the designers for a long time, and basically the rule among the designers of small hydros is that I'm giving a product according to the price that was paid for it. So if the developer comes to a designer and says, okay, I want a small hydro design for 10,000 bucks, he would get it. But it will be 10,000 bucks value only. In reality, a good project design will cost up to 100,000, let's say, maybe 80, but not 10,000 at all, okay? So, when you are identifying your risk, you have to assign the value or the importance of it based on such a matrix. It's not necessarily that you have to have such a matrix and good medium, but you have to understand your risks and evaluate those and prioritize those for yourself. Here is a little bit from the financing part. This is a rule that the financing institutions that we're working with are using. The potential loss that is coming with each risk has to be calculated in the financial analysis and in the cash flow. So basically, the debt service coverage ratio is it's one of the main kind of coefficients or indicators for a project feasibility. So if the risk is harming the debt service coverage ratio more than, if it can go less than 1.1, then it's a high risk. If it is over 1.1, then it's medium. Then if it is over 1.25, then it's a low risk. The idea is that do you know that service coverage ratio?
We haven't gotten there yet.
Okay, it's net income divided by the debt service. Okay? Basically the debt. So if you have to pay every month, I don't know, $100, but your net income is 99, no good. Okay?
It has to be at least 10% more than...
It has to be at least 10% more. Well, in classic project finance, I mean, one would need above one for sure. But in Armenia, it's not always the case. In Armenia, the debt service coverage ratio can be less than 1 because the bank takes into account other businesses that the developer has and the cash flow that is being generated from his other businesses. So if the developer is pledging the money from his other revenues, then it's fine for the bank. But it's a subjective approach from the bank, okay?
That's bank managing its risks.
Oh yeah.
Like
Through
collateral.
Through asking the developer to pledge his other cash flows. This is a classification of the risks that are usually in a small hydro. It's technical, geological, hydrological, energy output, etc., etc. There's a whole range of risks, and every risk here, I mean, geological can have its own sub kind of divisions of different risks under this topic. These are all very important things that have to be taken into account, and unfortunately, that's not the case usually. This is a tool that we are asking the developers and the designers to apply. The idea is that you identify the risk category, get the description of the risk, how you identify the risk itself, evaluation, assessment, prioritization for the developer, and then the mitigation measures. For example, under the hydrological risk, you can see overestimated water flow, which means that the designer or developer does not fully understand how much water is going to be in the river during the operation of his hydropower plant, meaning that he can overestimate the water flow and get less water, meaning less generation, less cash flow, and problems with servicing his debt or getting back his investment at all. So, for example, a geological risk can include landslides, seismicity, etc., etc. Technical risk can include, of course, the wrong design, which is very common as well in Armenia. We have done an analysis of 5 small hydros. We have hired a very renowned UK engineering firm, Arup. They have done a technical due diligence of 5 small hydros, and the issues that they have revealed were amazing. I'll show you some practical examples of what's going on in small hydros, you'll see. But the wrong design is one of the most critical things that is happening in Armenia because, first of all, we don't have that many qualified designers. There are some designers that are doing unfortunately, a copy-pasting from hydropower to hydropower. So it is all resulting in issues for the developer afterwards. Question?
Could you explain the difference between risk description and identification?
Okay. Risk description is concrete description of the risk. Okay, overestimated water flow, right? Risk identification, it means how do you identify the risk? And what do you have to do to identify whether there is such risk or not? Do you have to do hydrological study and underlying data set review? When I say underlying data set, I mean that, again, the rule of thumb among good designers at least is to use water flow for the past 50 years with 95% probability and to use such a data set in order to tell the developer how much water he is going to get in his river. In Armenia, we don't have meteorological stations on all the rivers. I mean, there is no country in the world that has meteorological stations on all the rivers. So usually the designers do approximation. They take some data from another river which is close to this one, which is using the same, let's say, I don't know, melting water from mountain or whatever. And then they do some approximation, some discounting, and they say, okay, this is the water that you're going to get. But in the same time, they have to do at least 1 year measurement on the site to have at least some real case data set as well. So that is a very important step, and if the designer overestimates the water, then no good. Energy calculation is a result of overestimated water gain. It means that the developer is getting wrong data about how much energy he is going to output, meaning that he's betting on more cash flow than he's going to get. And that will result in huge issues afterwards for him. Some other issues refer to environment. Mrs. Zartan is there. Low ecological flow, which is one of the most beloved topic by our environmentalists, which we very much respect. This issue was on the table since 2005 or even earlier, when the World Bank did an analysis of the barriers for renewables. But the issue here underlined in the environmental impact assessment law of Armenia, because the formulation of the environmental flow calculation was very vague. I mean, if I'm not wrong, it was saying something like to use multiple year observation and leave so much percentage that multiple year observation can be speculated the way you want. 2 years is already multiple years, okay? And stuff like that. So basically, okay, low ecological flow, meaning when you do a development of small hydro, you have to leave a certain amount of water in the river flow, because you have to conserve the ecosystem and also biodiversity, everything basically referring to environment. In Armenia, it is an issue because designers, it can be issue in case if the project developer has no conscience and he doesn't care about the environment. If he cares, okay, of course it's not an issue. Designer knows how much water in reality has to be left in the river. But if there is no any care about the river, the designer will be able to calculate the way that the developer gets more profit, leaving very few water in the river, but which will be again in the limits of the law, which is bad. So it's a speculative kind of issue, but it's not an issue lying on the side of the developer. It's more an issue on the policy side and environmental kind of.
To develop the law.
Huh?
The law should be developed.
No, law is there. It has to be. I mean, it's been already fixed last year. Faulty or no fish bypass. This is again another issue that is being criticized widely, which is objective criticism, because if you see what fish passes that are being built now, you will be amazed on the idea and the bright kind of mind of the developer and the designer. I don't know, a fish pass that has steps like this height. Like how a fish is going to jump, that nobody knows. But in reality, you left the fish pass, you just let fish can't go up. But that's okay. So, other issue is the social issue, social risk. Main social risk is the resettlement of the indigenous people, I mean people living in that area, because there is a potential flood area, which has to be considered when you're building this, because this high pressure water, if there is an issue with the penstock, it can result in flooding the area. So it has to be considered when there are people living around it. I don't know, resettlement has to have compensations and etc. etc. Another issue with the social is that sometimes the water from the river is taken before the irrigation channel is constructed. So basically the water flow goes like this. Here is an irrigation channel. Okay? People are using this for irrigation, but you take water from here to your power plant and all of a sudden there is no irrigation water. This is another issue. Again, this is not an issue with the developer. This is an issue with the water committee of Armenia under the, which ministry it is?
Under the
Ministry of Environment Protection. They have to take into account all these issues when they are giving the water permit to the developer. Everybody knows how any kind of permit is acquired in Armenia, unfortunately. So this is an issue. Other issues refer to cost, construction issues, faulty construction. This is an amazing part. For example, just to make more fun for you, there was a project which was being developed with penstock, the diameter of which had to be 1500 millimeters, so 1.5 meter diameter penstock. The developer contracted the construction company which was doing the construction, okay? The construction company ran out of this 1500 millimeter pipe, and they thought that, okay, if you are out of this 1500 millimeter, he put another 1500 and continued with 2 750s. And this was all under the ground. The developer did not see this. And then he again found 1500, put another this perpendicular and continued with 1500 up to the powerhouse. So when the developer was watching the powerhouse, it was 1500, 500 to your powerhouse. Okay, all cool. The generation was less by 25% or something, because this create traction, and it's huge pressure loss here. So construction is a very important issue. There was a water intake which was built on a river without proper geological survey of the ground. After the winter passed and there was the flood period, the water intake floated for like 10-15 meters down the river, because there was no normal geological study done. İHarke. Hayır.
Հայերն ասեմ, ես ոչինչ։
Hayır.
5-րդ կետը, որ դուք նշել եք, միջին ռիսկը, հա։
Այո։
Ու ասեմ, չեք մտածում, որ այդ այսօր ամենակարևոր ռիսկերից մեկն է, ու չեք միջին նշել, որովհետև ըստ էության այդ կառավարության որոշումը որ կա, բնապահպանական թողքի, ինքը փաստորեն թույլ է տալիս գետում նույնիսկ 0 լիտր
Հիմա չէ, փոփոխությունը որ արվել է նորմալ։
Չէ, ինքը դեռ ասում է, այսպես ասում է տարեկան ամենասակավաջուր տարվա 10 ամենասակավաջուր օրերի միջինն է վերցնում։ Կարող է ասենք մի գետ ա եղել, որ 10 օր ունեցել է 5 լիտր վարկյան ոսկ։ Ու իրավունք ունես թողես 5 լիտր վարկյան։ Այ աշխարհում դες փորձ կան, դարձ որ գետում թողան ետարեն 20 լիտր վարկյան ջուր, ոնց որ
Աշխարհում փորձ կա, որ գետում ոչի բան չի թողնել նույնիսկ, եթե ճիշտ եք ուզում իմանալ։ Ընդ որում լիգը, legitimate փորձեր կա։ Աշխարհում ինքը փորձ կա, որտեղ fish bypass չկա, հարաբերս։ Դա նույնիսկ եթե fish կա։ Եկեք նենց որ աշխարհից չխոսենք, եկեք խոսենք Հայաստանից։ Ուրեմն ինչ են դրել medium risk։
Անգլին
Shall I switch to English? Okay. The question was why the risk for low ecological flow was assessed by medium. I mean, why it was ranked medium, not high? Because, I mean, according to our colleague, this is a high risk for Armenia because according to the law, again, to the issue with the vague formalization of the law, one can leave very little or no water practically in the flow. I put medium on this because this is a risk that can be mitigated very easily. It's not a risk that can have such a high impact on the project itself. So if you do a proper evaluation of the risk and do the mitigation in the beginning, this just can't be high risk for the developer. That's why it's medium. I would put it low even. I put medium.
It can be
as
high
respect.
from
Because
I
from
think it's the
the
perspective from which you're
Yes.
evaluating
If
this.
from
even
business
from the
side, it's
perspective of
medium.
environmentalists, this can't be high risk because it is a matter of following the law and making the law normal. If the law is normal and it has normal formalization, this just can't be the case. You can even eliminate this risk from your metrics if the law is okay. So, as we were discussed the other day with Oleg, I would fight with not the developers but with the Ministry of Environment Protection to correct the law. Because I'm coming from the private side, right? I mean, we're financing the private sector. I'm with these guys. It doesn't mean that I'm against the environment. Of course not. This is my country, right? But anyway, I mean, when we're fighting with the developers on their side are perfectly right? I mean, I have all the papers. I have the water permit. I have the environmental impact assessment. Everything is there, right? What do you want from me? I mean, why are environmental colleagues of ours betting on the consciousness of the developer? I mean, I don't think that's the right approach. If I was an environmentalist, I am not an environmentalist per my job, but I'm an environmentalist, let's say, in my mind, I would not fight, but I would argue with the law and with the policy improvement, but not with the developer who has all the documentation and the papers on his hand. Because you can't bet on his consciousness. Okay, policy risks. From policy perspectives, the policymakers are also facing the risk. In Armenia, this was one of the major risks was the underutilization of scarce water resource. When we gave the preferential feed-in tariff and there was the boom of small hydro development in Armenia, the whole idea of developing renewables in Armenia was to increase the domestic generation of energy without increasing the import, of course, and to increase the energy security of the country using natural resources that we have, which was the scarce hydropower resource. Here, when we gave this preferential tariff and the boom happened, the policymakers were very much puzzled on how they can mitigate the risk of underutilizing the water. I explain you how it's done. This is the graph of 12 months water, right? So this is the winter, spring comes, there is the high water, then it goes low, summer passes, fall, etc. Usually when you do the analysis of the hydrology, you take this 3 months peak amount of the water and you plug this number, this Q, in the formula of capacity calculation. Based on this amount of water, you get the capacity factor. Capacity factor means your annual generation divided by the number of hours multiplied by the capacity. Basically, what percentage of the year you are generating with 100% of your capacity. Okay, this is a very important indicator for any kind of generation, not only renewables, any generation. In Armenia, the small hydros range in 28-35% capacity factor, meaning that only 35% of the year they are operating with their nominal installed capacity. Okay, the rest is low. It is being this is also a risk for the developer. It is being mitigated by installing 2 turbines and generators, just cutting the, let's say it's 1,000 megawatt, they put 2 500s, okay? So the efficiency of using your generator and turbine is still pretty high using one small, okay. But this risk of underutilization was because this is not in the law, these 3 months. There is not any legal or regulatory requirement for using this 3 months high water only. So betting your capacity. So basically, if the designer wants, they can speculate and take water from here, for example, this Q, lower Q, and use that in the calculation of the capacity. So basically, they do under capacity of the hydropower plant, but they get higher capacity factor. Basically meaning that they have more secure water for like 6 months. So the generation and the efficiency and the payback and the investment return ratio, IRR, will be higher for this project. But it means that we're losing this part of the water. So the risk here was that we need to make sure that the water is used to its most.
So from the
In
public
Armenia.
policy perspective, scarce water resources are underutilized when developers do that.
When developers, when they go down, they're
And
underutilized.
policymakers and law enforcement agencies.
There is no law. The regulator is watching this. When a design comes to the PSRC for acquiring the construction license, which is now eliminated, there's no more, but whatever. When they come for construction license, they do the hydrology review and they see how much water was taken in the calculation. And the regulator is watching after this. But there is no law or any kind of strict regulation.
So how can they push the developer? Just the discretion.
Just the regulator. I mean, they can reject the construction license application, which is again creating some subjectivity and nice. The next risk is the social risk of increased cost for the end users. This is the risk that Armenia is taking very seriously. Not Armenia, I'm sorry. The policymakers, the current government or any kind of government will take it seriously. Because in Armenia, now, at least now, before it was not like that, but now all the costs are transferred to the end user. So any kind of generation is 100% cost recovery. Any kind of tariff that is given to the generation is 100% cost recovery, meaning that all the costs are pushed to the end users, to us basically, okay? So when in 2007 we set this new preferential tariff, which was pretty high at that time, it meant that the costs incurred by the end users were going up according to the increased percentage of renewable generation in the generation portfolio of Armenia. So basically, the more the weight of the renewables in the generation portfolio, the more costs are transferred to the end user, the more need will be for increasing the end user tariff. Okay?
Do
So
you
this-
mean in budget?
I'm sorry?
Do you mean in budget for users? What do you mean?
Սակագներով։
Սակագին, եթե փոքր հեկերի քանակը շատանա բարձրի մեջ գեներացիայի, այսինքն իրենց քաշ ինչքան շատանա, այդքան իրենց կումուլյատիվ գինը, հա, որը պետքա վճարվի իրենց համար, մեծանում է, so մեր վրա ավելի շատ գին է փոխանցվում, հա, այսինքն մեր
Մեր
տարիքը։
հաշվից է։
Ի վերջո մենք ենք վճարում, չէ՞, դա ավելի դիֆերենցիալի տարիքի համար։
Կարգի ունեք բյուջեի մասնակցությունը։
Ում բյուջեի։
Պետ բյուջեի։
Չէ, պետ բյուջեն կապչի է, ընդհանրապես։ Բոլոր գները, եթե ուզեք, այդպես սխեմանիկ միացում։ Իհարկե։
Բայց ուղղակի բանը իրացվում է ոչ միանգամից չէ դա մի քանի տարի հետո նոր հետո գինը բարձրացնում են ինչ-որ կամ էլ
Այս գեներատորն է, հա, այս ցանցն է, այս high voltage-ն է, այս օպերատորն է, հոսանքը ստեղից, то есть գեներատորը high voltage-ի միջոցով իր արտադրած էներգիան փոխանցում է ցանցին, ցանցը տալիս է end user-ին։ Հա?
Բայց փոքր
Այստեղ փող կա, այստեղ փող կա, այստեղ փող կա, այստեղ փող կա, այստեղ էլ փող կա։ Այսինքն բոլորի ծախսերը, հա, այսինքն գեներատորը վճարում է high voltage-ին, իրական չի վճարում, գինը ինչ որ առաջանում, transfer-ի համար, հա, energy transfer-ի համար։ High voltage-ը տալիս է network-ին, network-ը տալիս է մեզ, այստեղ էլ է փողն, այստեղ մի ուրիշ է։ Այստեղ հետադարձ փողն է սկսվում։ Հա, երբ որ high voltage-ից ցանցին, ցանցը արդեն վաճառում է մեզ, մենք հետ ենք տալի փող, այս փողը գնում է համ օպերատորին, որը կառավարում է համակարգը, հա, համ գնում է ցանցին, իր մարժան է, profit margin-ը իր, համ գնում է high voltage-ին transfer-ի համար, համ էլ գնում է գեներատորին իր արտադրած էլեկտրոէներգիայի համար։ Այսինքն գեներատորի տարիֆը ինչքան բարձրանա, այստեղ sense direct երևա։
Հարցը վերաբերվում է պետ բյուջեի։ Եթե
Չկա պետ բյուջե այստեղ։
պետ բյուջեն ես էլ եմ ուզում։
Սուբսիդիա, այդպես բան չկա
Չէ,
հաստատ,
ոչ
պետ բյուջե չկա։
ընդհանրապես ոչ մի բան պետ բյուջեն կամ բանը չի ստանում այդ արտադրած։
Ոնց հարկերն ասում։
Հարկերն ասում։
Միայն հարկի։
Հա, որոշ ինչ ստանում։
Ինչ հարկի է։
Շատ հարկա ստանում, ավելացած արժեքի հարկա ստանում։
Չէ,
Դե մասնաբաժին օրինա տեղից էլ ենք կարա շատ։
Մասնաբաժին
Չէ,
չունի։
մասնաբաժին։
At least poker hydrogen։
Դա դրաման է։
Ես վերջերս արդեն էլ ոչ մի բան եմ ասում, մեջ մասնաբաժին չկա։
Որը մանր
մի հարց է։
Ռեսուրսի օգտագործման համար։
Ռեսուրսի գին չկա։
Ստեկ չկա, ստեկ չկա։
Այդ հետադարձ կապը գնիթ հանդասման, այսուհանդերձ ամեն տարի չի արվում։
Միանշանակ ամեն տիրատարի չի արվում։
Ինչ-որ
Վերջերս եք ասում։
պերիոդ ասենք
Հիմնականը
6 տարի, թե 7 տարի, հետո նոր 60
Չէ,
անցել։
կարող է լինի, ասենք, մի 2 տարի consecutive կարա եւ աճ լինի։ Դա ինչը կախված է նայած, թե ինչքան capacity կմտնի ցած, կարող է վաղը մյուս օր մեր մոտ հայտնվի մի հատ ինչ-որ վիտրյակի developer, որը գասի 30 մեգավատ պետրո եմ ուզում դնել, հա, կողմային եմ ուզում դնել, միանշանակ տարիֆի մեջ կերևանի։ То есть Նես չի, որ ասենք ինչ-որ 7 տարի, 1-5 տարի, նոտնս բան չկա, տենց rule of thumb գոյություն չունի։ It's on need based, այսինքն ցանցի մարժան
Պես չի տեղյում։
Չէ, անուջը բնական է, ոչ ցանցի Okay, the question was about whether the increase of the end user tariff is being done every year or no, it's like every 5 years to 7 years. It's based on the need basically. So if there is always some not lagging, but there is always some
Inertia.
some reserve margin in the tariff that can accommodate the marginal increase of the renewable percentage in the generation portfolio. Okay, so basically the networks are ready to decrease their margin by a certain percentage just to play with the game. But if it goes less than the minimum required profit margin, the tariff will be increased immediately. Okay.
And what is the situation today? Is there good margin for further increase or not?
Is there good margin for further?
Let's say there are so many small hydro power plants that are having underutilized capacity, and these are new ones that are being built. So this whole cost is being imposed eventually to the system. But the system has increased already last year once the tariff. After this increase, how much is your estimate that we can still wait?
I have no estimates for that. Even the Ministry of Energy has no estimate of that. The only body that can have any estimates is the regulator, the Public Service Regulatory Commission, which is not sharing that, of course, because I wouldn't share it either. It doesn't make sense because they have their own calculations, and according to the law and the setup, they are independent. So the ministry cannot dictate them, the policymaker. The policymaker can propose, the regulator can decide whether to follow or not, based on their own decision. Okay? So whatever the regulator does, it's a hard kind of topic.
From the end user, from the owner standpoint, the small hydro power plant owner standpoint, it's always better to have kind of smaller. There should be some optimum. It should be kind of small enough to have high capacity factor, so that you pay back very quickly your investment.
It's all taken into account when setting the tariff, Armenian. When they have this 3 months high water requirement to build your capacity on that, it means that the payback should be, at least, I mean, the rule of thumb is around 7 to 9, maybe 10 years. If it is more, it's your decision, don't build it. So basically, these are the rules of the game. This is the tariff, this is the 15 years guaranteed purchase. We, as a country, are not ready to pay more. So these are the rules. If you want to play with those, play. If not, it's up to you.
You had a question?
Yes.
You had a question?
Հիմա մեր հաշվեկշռում մոտ 6%-ն է վերականգնող էներգետիկ ռեսուրսների հաշվին ապահովում ու դրա ազդեցությունը մեր վերջնական սպառման գնի վրա գրեթե շատ փոքր է, աննշան է։ Ինչ-որ հաշվարկ կա, ենթադրենք ավելանա, չգիտեմ, 10%-ային կետով կամ ավելի տոկոսային կետով ազդեցությունը ինչ կլինի մեր վերջնական վճարացակագնի համար ու այդ օպտիմում կետը որն է, եթե կա իհարկե նմանատիպ ինչ-որ հաշվարկ։
Ուրեմն օպտիմում կետ հասկացողությունը ինձ թվում է չի կարող այդտեղ լինի։ Օպտիմում կետը Շատ վիրտուալ ինչ-որ հասկացություն ենք ասում, օպտիմում կետը ո՞րն է։ Օպտիմում կետը այն է, որը դեռ ժողովուրդը չի դուրս գա կողոց սսի կրակել։ Հա։ Ցանկացած երկրում, մենակ Հայաստանի մասին չի դեռ խոսքը, այդ է օպտիմում կետը։ Իսկ այն թե կա արդյոք տես մոդել, բնականաբար այդ բոլոր մոդելները ռեգուլատորի մոտ կա։ Եթե կուզեք դուք ինքներդ էլ կարող եք այդ մոդելը սարքեք, շատ հեշտ է իրականում սարքելը, բոլոր data-ն ռեգուլատորի վեբսայթում կա, այսինքն generation-ի մասին, portfolio մասին, սա snapshot figure-ները, տարեկան արտադրություն, import, export, ամեն ինչ, domestic use, own use, ամեն ինչը կա, Excel-ի մեջ դնեք, կարող դուք սարքեք մոդել շատ հեշտ։ Էլ չեմ ասում ինչ մոդելներ ունի ռեգուլատորը, հավատացեք, որ մեր ռեգուլատորը բավական այնց ոչինչ ռեգուլատոր է, բանիմաց ես կասեի։
Քանի որ թեմի մասին խոսք եղավ, բնի ձևավորումը իրականում դա հասկանալի է, այդ ինքը արվել է երևի որպեսզի սեկտորը բուրըն զարգացում ապրի, դրա համար է այդ գինը ֆիքսվել, իհարկե պարզ է։ Հիմա դուք ինչ եք կարծում, իմաստունի այդ գինը ի վերջո սակագնի փոփոխության առաջարկ ներկայացնել ընդհանրապես այդ բանին, հանձնաժողովին, ինչ իմաստով որ ասենք ներդրումների հետ վերադարձնելուց հետո գոնե, հա չեմ ասում անմիջապես, սակագինը սկսի իջնել, ու դրա փոխարեն մենք գոնե սկսենք զբաղենք այլ ընդրանքային միջոց բանի, հա, դուք էլ իհարկե այլ ընդրանքային էներգիայի աղբյուրների զարգացումով։ Այդ առաջարկը պետք է անել ի վերջո, թե չէ, ձեր կարծիքը ո՞նց է։
Blackberry-ս թողած չնի ավենի սենյակում կցույց տային ամակը։ Այսօր հայեցին համաշխարհային բանկի հետ, մենք հիմա մի հատ ուջուրիկ ստադի ենք սարքում, որտեղ կցույց տանք, թե ինչքան պետք է լինի տարիֆը 15 տարուց հետո, ընդորում նախարարությունն է մեզ այնց խնդրել էներգետիկայի, որտեղ հիմա տարակուսանքների մեջ է policy maker, անգլերեն է, երևանցն։ Okay, the question was about whether it makes sense to propose any changes to the feed-in tariff for the projects that have reached 15 years guaranteed purchase period and they've practically paid off all their loans, okay? And the answer is yes. Right now IFC together with the World, when I say World Bank, it means the IBRD, okay? But we call them World Bank. But we're World Bank today. So IFC together with World Bank, per request of the Ministry of Energy, we're doing a study which will assess the real operation maintenance costs and also assign a certain profit margin for the project owners and propose a new set of tariffs for those projects that have reached 15 years. Basically, we will decrease the tariff, like seriously decrease the tariff. Public Service Regulatory Commission is not fond of this idea because as good as they are also fans of status quo. They like how things are done and they don't want to do any new movements unnecessary. So, but the Ministry of Energy is interested in this study. They want to propose something because it doesn't make sense. The projects that have paid back and they are going over 15 years, they are getting huge over profit. And we all are paying for that. It doesn't make sense. So the policymaker wants to propose this to regulator. For that, we're doing this study. Tomorrow we're meeting the regulator to discuss this. So yeah, you just hit the nail.
And just connect to this question. What is the clientele or the spectrum of the owners of these small hydropower plants?
You don't know.
By numbers, maybe I don't know.
Okay, I don't have numbers either, but as I like to say, especially to my international colleagues, I say there is no average Joe developing a hydropower plant in Armenia. Okay.
Given that tariff is going to change after 15 years, or
Hopefully.
or whatever, I understand that there's still no hydropower plants which have been built, which are like 15 plus years old.
There are hydropower plants that are 14 years old.
Okay, so isn't there a risk that, especially if the tariff decreases, the owners will be kind of over-exploiting the resource during the 15 years, and then just leaving the hydropower or selling it, or using.
Why do we care if they sell it?
Well, not that we care about they sell it. We care if they use more water than.
No, they can't use more water. How can they use more
Are they
water?
already using all of it?
They're using it to the most. I mean,
To the design level.
So there's no risk that they're going
you're
to.
talking about crime now, basically.
Yeah, I'm talking about crime
Nobody's
because that's.
secure from that.
Well, we are not secure, and that's the reality in the country.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. We can all assign each of us to one hydropower and monitor those. You're asking a question that nobody has an answer to. Is there a
What
risk?
I mean is,
Yes.
is this going to be taken into account? And
Is it taken into account now if a project has not reached 15 years?
well, with
It's
decreasing
the same
tariffs.
situation like before or after 15
Okay,
years,
but
it's still
with
the
the
same.
decreasing tariffs, isn't this risk going to increase?
I don't think so, honestly.
The question is about, let's say, in 5 months, there is a tariff for photovoltaics. IFC will be doing stuff with that.
Certainly. Right now, Armenia is preparing the business plan for the SREP. SREP is Scaling Up Renewable Energy Program. It is done with the Clean Energy Fund money. It's a international fund where donor governments have put money, and there are 5 recipients of the money already. 5 countries recipients. Armenia is a candidate country. We're submitting the SREP plan now, the business plan. The idea is to develop new renewable energy technologies aside from hydros. Hydros are not even in the work plan, in the business plan. And photovoltaics. Strangely enough, after we did not we, but the consultant for the Ministry of Energy, but all the multilateral development banks were all part of the SREP anyway. So when I say we, means we were working on it together. And photovoltaics, we're very close to break even already. And as a matter of fact, yeah, Armenia might be soon doing something with photovoltaics and geothermal.
Geothermal potential is more 70.
No. It's not that small. There is a couple of very nice project sizes which are going to be explored, and we have actually allocated a good chunk of money for drilling.
I remember in 1996, Lamar International did an estimate of 400 megawatt of geothermal. But then it was it was cancelled. They say that it was not correct. The real estimate is like 70, 75 megawatt.
I'm not a geothermal specialist, I can't comment that deep, but you can ask for the plan from Tamara.
In Yerevan there is some research of 25 megawatt of
570, that's the maximum as far as I know.
Yerevan, it's in Sunni Creek region. And the renewable resources
not
energy
very
agency
big,
found is doing something. And that program also with SREP.
Everything is going to be under Soviet project. And multilaterals are going to invest. All of us, IFC, BRD, ADB, we're all chipping.
Tigran, if I could ask you to finish the risk presentation, if you continue.
Yeah.
Partak, if you can.
So the latter risk is on the environment, of course, but we have touched on it already. But this is a risk, as I said before, I think this risk lies on the policy side, not on the developer side, because at the end of the day, if we have a law which prohibits, I don't know, killing people, nobody kills it, right? I mean, not everybody kills it, at least. So if there was a law which would prohibit leaving so few water in the river, I don't think any normal person will dare to go for less, basically. I'm basically done with the risks, and I would like to go through some real examples of the risks that were not taken into account by the developers. You can see here, it's a water intake. I won't say which power plant it is, but you can see landslides from both sides. And this is the sand trap. This goes to the penstock. Basically, this all goes to the hydropower turbine, which is not very good.
That is not on the left-hand side. That's not on the left-hand side.
This is the fish pipe.
Is that that
This is the water intake. This goes to hydropower plant. This is using an old pipe. You can see the corrosion level on the pipe. This is a real case. And this is the British company that have come with these results. Developers are digging out the old pipes from the Soviet era and using those. But the bad issue here, I mean, the problem here is that they don't have calculations for these rusty and high traction pipes. So basically there's a huge loss of pressure here because of these bad pipes, which are not taken into account in the design, because the designer is not designing his power plant for bad pipes. He's designing it for good pipes, I don't know, some GRP or whatever, but this is not accounted. So this means the developer is going to have losses, okay? But he doesn't understand.
But plus the developer, there's also public policy loss here, because you're not achieving
Underutilizing the resource, of course, yes. Everything is there. Agree.
But if the engineers do not take into consideration the pipes, who should care?
Engineers, I mean, the designer is
The
giving
designer is
the
not-
developer a design with new pipes which have to have allowable traction coefficient lambda
By
in,
time they
etc.
should
But this is
understand.
much higher traction. So it's up to the developer basically. If the developer is smart enough to go for the second use pipes, I mean, what can designer do?
This is a construction problem that the developer may not even be aware it's happening.
Well,
And
they
it's
are
big.
aware.
So it's you're paying for a certain product, and for the contractor to lower their costs, they go find cheap stuff and they bring and use it. But that has direct impact on future revenues of the plant, and also has direct impact on the public policy objectives that you have.
I love this one. This is an excavation site for Powerhouse construction. So basically the ground level is lower than the river. They have dig and there is water, but I think they will construct it there. This is also, I mean, our Norwegian colleagues, Henry and by the way, from North Scandinavia, they were crazy about these pictures because this is nonsense for them. How can one have such a, not law, but absence of safety at the power station? Because it's all slippery during winter, but the engineer has to go there to open the gate, etc., etc., so it's fun to work there.
Thrill.
No, German, no. This is another one. It's a pencil gate, and take a look at the axis of this. But it works. You just put some more strength to it. And this is also a good one. This is the water. This is the penstock basically coming into the powerhouse, and they have planted trees on the pipes. This is also a homemade mechanical equipment. And it's all over the place. We have some 2-3 producers of local hydropower turbines. The most renowned is Vahani Turbinere. I mean, there is pros and cons of having local turbine and generator. Generator is not making, so it's okay, but the turbine is made here. The pros is that it's made here. You can call Vahan and he will be at your power station the next day, because if he doesn't come, he will be killed. Right? But the cons is that he is not using any normal metal. It's not certified. There is no any efficiency guarantee, although he says it's 110% efficiency, whatever. But there is no real evaluation of the turbine quality, efficiency, etc. I've been to the factory. It was a very nice experience. It's an old factory near the customs when you drive to airport. And they have these huge cutters, metal cutters, guillotine, which is cutting like this thick metal. And we were there with our German colleagues from EMBW. It's one of the largest utilities in Germany. And these guys from EMBW, they saw this cutter and it was made in Germany in 1930 something. It's like, wow, this is German. This is German. And the employee at the factory said, tell this Fritz. In Armenia it was like, es Fritz in Asa, որ մենք իրանց հերը անիցել ենք, կրվիժանում ենք իրանց ստանոքով. At that time we heard this. Okay, hide, բախկով է, լուրջ եմ ասում, seriously. Ասում եմ ինչ է, ասում եմ կտրում է. Մենք էլ այդ գինոսուսը երկաթը Աշում շատ հետարքի է սարկում բաղանը, բայց սարկում է, բախում աշխարհում է։ Ես տեսեմ տուրբին, որտեղ այս ֆրացող մասերը, գեներատորը, իրանց the axis of the generator is rotating, it's on the gear. On the gear, and it has to be oiled, right? But there are some special equipment which is holding the oil together in the gear. So and it's done once and for a side leakage. Okay. Մի խոսքով, սալնիկի, ու տաուտ արած, պաչմիկը աշխատում ասան սաղկյան 30 տարի, տենց աշխատում մեկ-մեկ տաուտ են արած։ Վանի մոտը տենց չի, վանի մոտ սալնիկ չկա, սենց մատ տրուբա է սենց բարակ, սենց սվարգա արը, գնում է պաչմիկի վրա, վերվը ծապլի է դրած, ու մեկը շշով յուղ արվեցնում։
Աշխատում է։
Բայց աշխատում է։ Second-hand high voltage cables, and you can see this all over the place again. This is crazy for an international engineer because I mean this just can't happen in the real world.
And there's a occupational safety issue there.
Of course, I mean there are people working there, but then again it's a risk for the developer because this can blow up one day, right? So there is no normal proper insulation even.
I assume that when the bank receives the application for credit, there's the budget for the development. So the costs for cables and all the second-hand stuff, are the costs calculated for the new equipment, or it's for? Does the bank know that it's going to be second-hand?
For example, our client bank, partner bank, Armenia bank, they have hired an independent, and that was a requirement by our loan agreement. they had to have an independent engineer. They have an environmental specialist which does the expertise all the time. They follow the construction. They provide us with reports. So, but it's not done for IFC. It's done for the bank at the end of the day and the developer. Because 15 million loss for IFC, I mean, we won't feel it.
No, what I mean is that you may get a credit for new equipment and then buy second-hand.
That happens a lot. If there is no proper supervision over the construction process and over the procurement of the equipment, then of course it will be done. That usually happens with either it's equity investment, no debt, or the debt is from some local bank which are their friends.
Tigran, I think, I don't know which one it was, the Millennium Challenge or one of these funds that spend a lot of money, and they had among some of the best records in terms of environmental compliance and things like that, because they withheld some amount of money until everything was in compliance and then they released the funds at the end. Is there some kind of a requirement like that that you have for quality assurance?
No, we don't have such a requirement. The money is usually disbursed in tranches. So basically the first tranche is not disbursed until the tranche is backed up by some investment already on the equity side. And then the tranches go for every deliverable basically. So for the milestones of the project development, they get tranches of the...
So the last amount they receive would be before completion of the project?
Yes, it will be before.
And is there any experience in IFC to change that and experiment with after?
I see what you're saying. That
Because
will
it's a
be
way of
done-
managing risks.
I
these
agree
kinds
with
of
you.
risks, you know.
That will be done if there is a direct financing from IFC to a project. But since in case of small hydros in Armenia and I think all over the world, small hydros are low investment projects. We don't do direct, so basically the project risk is taken care by the bank, not IFC. So we lend to the bank. When we do the lending to the bank, we basically take the bank risk, not the project risk. Because if we take the project risk, it will mean that, for example, Jermuk 2, which is built in Jermuk, will be a huge issue for IFC because that would mean that we have approved such a project, for example. Although with Jermuk, it was all clear again with the documentation, unfortunately. Whatever. High voltage switchgear with access to water, this was also great. This is the turbine, this is the water discharge from here, and this is a hole which they open this to see how the water is going to the river. But it's water flowing here, and this is high voltage already. So yeah, for operator it's also fun to work there. That's it. Sure, please, questions.
The first one is related to the hydropower, small hydropower cost per installed kilowatt with and without all the risk assessments. What is the differential of the risk assessments? All the audits and the other stuff that you have on the tables.
Well, I won't say how much percentage will it be in the costs, but the problem here is that when you are hiring a proper designer, the designer already has to take care of the risk matrix. This tool, which will have all the risks outlined for the developer, the evaluation, identification, and mitigation. I mean, it all has to be already in the design itself. The developer is not going to do a risk analysis. I mean, they are not qualified to do so. It has to be done by the designer. Later on, when it goes to the bank has to hire an independent engineer to do the due diligence of the project. That is when this engineer will also check the risks, which are already kind of identified by the designer. Unfortunately, in Armenia, this is not a common practice to do risk assessment and prepare such nice tools and etc. Unfortunately, but in normal cases, it's not even a requirement. It's for the good of the developer. The developer has to require it from the designer. The designer has to provide this. But the designer is saying, I was paid $20,000, I'm doing $20,000 worth job. That's it. They don't even go to geological stuff.
And right now the average price is like 1,500, 1,000 per
Per
kilowatt.
kilowatt hour? Per
Per
kilowatt?
kilowatt, yeah.
Yeah, up to 2000, I think, closer to 2000. It depends on what you are constructing. If you're constructing it with local equipment, no automation, and etc., it can be like 1200, maybe even less. But if you are doing normal equipment, you're procuring it from a normal producer, then it will be, yeah, with automation and etc., it will be up to 2000, maybe even more.
So it's getting higher and higher.
Of course. Higher, no, it was there always if you were supposed to do good thing.
Some time that we were talking about like $500–600 per kilowatt installed,
No,
and this was the rusty.
that can be the
Pipelines.
cost of the turbine generator on it, but not the kilowatt installed. There was a good funny case when a local developer went to China to purchase turbine and generator, and he came back and then he wanted to he wanted his friend to also buy from that producer, and he asked them to send him some booklets. They sent booklets with his picture on it, because he was the one and only customer they ever had. In a couple of months he could not find them. That's also an issue, because when developer does procurement of the equipment, they have to get quotes from normal producers. That's very important. China doesn't mean bad. Chinese equipment is being installed in Norway even. And very good equipment. But that's not cheap equipment. It's not the Chinese that we think of.
And what is the smallest project size that IFC is considering for financing your system?
Direct?
Yeah, with the client. Let's say I want to do that.
It will be in the range of 7 to 10 million at least.
AMD.
AMD?
Dollars. The smallest 7 to 10 million dollars.
Yes.
But if I do with something with the banks, and I want a small hydropower plant, so it's the banks will not consider it through your system anything smaller. Let's say
You
I
want
want
a
a 1
direct loan
megawatt.
from IFC, or you want to work with Armenia Bank?
Armenia Bank, yes.
You can do, I don't know, $10, whatever.
Well,
They don't care for
so
that.
1 megawatt is okay.
Yes, very much. But with the IFC, if you want to have direct, it will be 7 to 10 million at least. Because we have fixed costs which will be imposed on the loan later on.
Inga, and then please, the students in my class, I want you to ask questions about risk and risk analysis and risk assessment, okay? The whole thing is about risk analysis, so, continue.
Մենք տեսանք շատ շնորհակալություն շատ հետաքրքիր պրեզենտացիայի համար։ Ես ուզում եմ ուղղակի մի քանի հարց տալ։ Առաջինը շրջակա միջավայրի վրա ազդեցության մասին, որը այդքան ռիսկերի մեջ շատ քիչ տեղ է գրավում։ Դուք հիմնականում իհարկե կանկարանք
Ծրագիրը իրականացնողի ռիսկերի։
Բայց ես ուզում եմ ասել, որ մենք ունենք քանի, այո, հոսքի վերաբերյալ։ Արդեն խոսվեց ինչքան քիչ հոսք է թողնում, էկոլոգիական թողք է թողնվում ջրայ գետերում հիմնականում, բայց դրա մասին մենք իհարկե շատ կարող ենք խոսել, եկեք արդեն փակենք այդ թեման, այդ անվերջ թեմա է, բայց կարևոր բանը no-go zones, կա այդպիսի հասկացողություն եւ մեր մոտ այդ հասկացողությունն ընդհանրապես հաշվի չի առնում, բայց IFC-ն, ինչպես ֆինանսավորող կազմակերպությունը, ինքը իր ստանդարտներ ունի։ Այսինքն հարցը, ինչքանով է համապատասխանում ձեր ստանդարտներին այդ բաղը, որ փոքր հեկերը կառուցվում են այդ no-go zone, այսինքն օրինակ շկաղող բուֆերային զոնայում, որը ընդհանրապես արգելված է կամ Սևանի ավազանում, եւ եթե դա չի համապատասխանում է թե ոչ, եւ դուք ընդհանրապես գնահատում եք այդ ռիսկերը, սա առաջի եւ նույն շարունակությունը, ուրեմն կա կումուլյատիվ էֆեկտներ։ Այսինքն մենք ունենք օրինակ Եղեգիս գետը, որտեղ որ 12 լիցենզիա տրվածը բոլորը գիտեն, գետը ընդամենը 50 քանի կիլոմետր երկարության, 12 փոքր հեկերը իրար վրա, արդեն գետը ուրեմն դարձրել են հիվանդ, դա ոչ թե մեր ուղղակի կարծիքը, դա պաշտոնական տվյալներ, որտեղ որ գետում փոփոխվել է իր ֆիզիկա-քիմիկական հատկություններ եւ գետ արդեն չի համարվում պիտանի եւ համապատասխանող իր առաջվա ստատուսին։ Եվ այդպես կումուլյատիվ էֆեկտները դուք ընդհանրապես հաշվարկում եք, այսինքն այդ ծանր հետևանքները դուք ինչպես եք համեմատում, թե ընդհանրապես չեք համեմատում այդ ձեր ստանդարտների հետ։ Ես խոսում եմ հենց կոնկրետ IFC ստանդարտների մասին եւ նույնը վերաբերվում է սոցիալական ստանդարտների, սա առաջի հարցն է։
Մի ռիսկ է ուղղակի ավելացնում։
Եվ
աղմուկի
ֆակտորը, որը ահավոր մեծ եւ սոցիալական եւ որպես աղտոտիչ է համարվում։ Աղմուկը ընդհանրապես ոչ կա պրոյեկտներում, ոչ կա ստանդարտներում, ոչ մի բան չկա, բայց սանիտարական նորմ մենք ունենք, նույնիսկ Հայաստան ունի սանիտարական նորմը։ Ոչ մետեղ ընդհանրապես չէր գրվում, համապատասխանում է թե ոչ։ Իսկ սա մեծ աղտոտիչ է, դուք քանի որ առաջի սկզբից դուք ասացիք, որ աղտոտիչ ուրիշ բան չկա, չէ, աղտոտիչ ֆակտոր կա, ուղղակի չի նշվում։
Առաջինը disclaimer. Whatever I'm saying is not official IFC statement, okay? And please հաշվի որտեղ otherwise in communication of being.
Բայց կարող է դասանը ստանալ։
Իհարկե կարող եք, որպես Տիգրան Փարվանյան, քաղաքացի։ IFC-ն ունի բնականաբար մեր performance standard-ները, environmental social standards, 9 ստանդարտներ, որոնք օգտագործում են բոլոր տեղ աշխարհում, այսինքն մեզ այնց է դուրս եկել ու բոլորը օգտագործում են արտակարգ ստանդարտներ են, որ կամար նոսը նի պատոճիտ ստանդարտներ են, okay? Բայց okay, IFC has its performance standards, environmental social performance standards, which are considered probably the best, and all the international finance institutions and the banks are using those because those are considered one of them. So we do have the standards. The problem here, it's not a problem, it's an approach. First of all, as I just was saying to Alan, we do not take project risk, we take the bank risk. I mean, when we just do the lending, we work with the financial institution that is our borrower. We evaluate the risk of the financial institution, we give them the money, right? Second, before doing the investment in small hydros in Armenia, we have done an analysis of the, how can I say, how much the local legislation follows our environmental social standards, basically. In theory, I have to say, our local legislation is not that bad, as strange as you can consider it. The reality is that the local legislation is being abused. It has some, of course, some faults in it, but it is being abused, bypassed. You know how well it is, how easy it is being bypassed. We all know that. It can refer to water flow, it can refer to water permit, it can refer to land permit, to environmental impact assessment signed by the Minister of Environmental Protection of Armenia, given to Jermuk 2, to Yerevan, to everybody else, right? So when we talk about that, it's hard for IFC to come to a country, and this is not IFC position, this is my, again, just in case. No, because I have to say this, because it is simple. When we come to a country and we want to do anything, we cannot decide that the country has to change something in its policy. We take a look at the policy in the legislation and the regulation, we see that it complies with our regulation more or less, and it's more usually than less, but the situation is that it's not being followed. How can IFC or any kind of international organization make the local decision makers follow the law? I mean, how do you see that? It's not possible. By your policy, of course. Our policy? How can I go to, I mean, I don't want to call names, but how can I go to Narimanyan and say, don't give him the water permit for him? How do you see that? I mean, it's impossible.
But you cannot provide the finance.
No, we're providing the finance for the good. We're providing the finance, taking into account that the local legislation is not bad, it's good. It's just that they don't follow. How can we enforce following the legislation? I mean, it's impossible. Or you can just leave the country, but that's not in our mandate. We need to help. I don't know if I was able to answer the question. I mean, this is not the right place to ask what can be done in that level, unfortunately.
I mean, it's a relevant question insofar as it's a question of managing the environmental risks. And there's a lot of money that comes into a country. Even though the policy on paper is fine, there could be issues around, complying with that policy, making it work, making legislation work. And when there's sufficient, problems with making the law work and making effective policy, then international organizations have to make a decision whether they support it or not. I do understand the dilemma, because if you don't support it, it doesn't necessarily get fixed.
Yeah.
It's kind of a mixed up, it's a very complicated and not very smooth path to development. That compromises are made, trade-offs are made, and hopefully in the long term you go towards the positive, both environmental and economic.
We, in our loan agreement, we mandate the lending institution to establish environmental social management system. They go through a number of trainings from our ENS specialists. Our environmental social specialists do site visits. Like this spring, we are going to have another mission of environmental social specialists in the city. We are going to visit all 12 small hydros that Armenia has financed. I mean, we try to help them. We educate them on our performance standard. We have a checklist of minimum documentation required, but the checklist includes environmental impact assessment, for example. And that's already enough to create speculations. So, I mean, we try to impose, we try to help the bank to be able to mitigate the environmental risks. But at the end of the day, I mean, we have what we have. I mean, we want to, and we try to. We educate the bank, but we cannot educate our decision makers or developers.
If I could ask my students to sit, because I really want them to also talk. Students, don't look away, Anna. I'm asking you. Do you have a question? All the risks are clear, right? And it's just like
most of the risks, they seem to be easily avoided. Like the landslide, you can just build a fence. The pipes, you can just protect, like corrosion protection. Can't it be just enforced because it will save lots of money on the long run?
Who will save lots of money?
The project owner, for example, you just build a fence.
How can you make somebody put more money today when he does not even understand why he has to put that money?
No, I mean small amounts of money, like
No, it's not small amounts of money. When
no,
we
if
were
you just build a
starting with
fence
GOV
for the landslide.
in 2006, Lamar International said we're not going to approve any project with local equipment. Like none, zero. At that time, the decision was made that we cannot impose such requirement on the market because we need the market to develop. So we need to leave it alone, let it develop itself. As a statistic, I will say that today we have much more projects that are already procuring good quality equipment than we had like 5 years ago. But it happened gradually and naturally. People are now trying to avoid using old pipes. Now we have the GRP pipe production here. You know GRP, less reinforced plastic. I mean, it's like plastic pipes you have in your home, but it's more heavy duty for hydropower plant. And we have production now. But the market is developing gradually. You cannot make somebody put more money and tell him, no, you put today more money and you will have more revenue. Let him decide. It's private sector.
No, I meant for like just like an advising. If you do this,
No, advising, we do it all the time. And it's not like they don't know if that is good or bad. It's their decision.
But I also think it is their decision, but often there are construction norms and standards, right? That takes away the risks involved, public health risks, environmental policy or energy policy risks, and those construction standards and operation standards often ensure that you get those public policy objectives you have in mind as well. So private sector can go up to some point, and it might take longer. But if you have an adequate legislative and enforcement structure in place, you can reduce a lot of these risks, even though the private sector has to pay more upfront. That's part of cost of doing business.
Agreed.
That's why you get 15 years guaranteed.
Agree with
purchase.
you, but we have a requirement that the construction has to be done by a energy sector licensed company, which has a license to do construction in energy sector. We have many developers who have their own construction company. They go and apply for a license to operate in energy sector. They get the license and they build their own small hydros. I mean, you had the requirement. It has to be qualified. They get the license. There is a requirement that every construction has to have site supervision. And the supervision usually has to be ordered from the designer who has done the design, because built as drawn or drawn as built, everything has to be fixed. Any kind of alteration to the initial design has to be fixed, built into the drawings, etc. None. It's not done. You know how much is the fine for not having the supervision? It's 350,000 dirhams. Cool? I mean, they just pay it.
Anna, you have a question?
Anna already asked one, so.
Okay.
Thanks.
Who else is there?
Is there any estimation or information on how much of the hydropower is used to run water pumps? How much of the electricity produced nationally?
Oh, I don't have the data, but you can ask for the data from the water utility by getting the capacity of their pumps and the number of hours of operation.
There's more than one water utility in Armenia, right?
There's two, Yerevan and Armenia. One is under the management of Suar, the other one is Violet.
Maybe Inga, you had another question? Or you start to make it, huh? Now, you have to pick up and
Մենք ունենք հայտնի սխեման, հա, որը փոքր հեկերի վերաբերյալ դուք երևի տեղյակ եք հաստատ 2009 թվականի էսը նկատի ունեմ, այդ սխեմայի զարգացման մեր փոքերի զարգացումը փոքր հեկերի տիպը պետք է հասնի սխեմայում գրված է նշված է 320, հա, այս տիպը հիմա մենք արդեն ունենք 150 լիցենզիա հաստատված մեր այսօրվա սիտուացիան ուրեմն կամ
39 under operation գործող 77
լիցենզիա սա հաստատված լիցենզիա տրված է բայց այդ սխեմայով պետք է կառուցվի ընդհանրապես 300 մոտավորապես 320 տանկամ 15 փոքր հեկ ըստ ձեզ մեր ջրային ռեսուրսները արդեն իսկ գործող հեկերը վտանգի տակ են դրվել այդ բոլոր գետերը մենք դա նույնիսկ դա Սյունիքի մարզի զարգացման պլանում նշված է որ փոքր հեկերը Սյունիքի մարզում վտանգում են Սյունիքի մարզի զարգացումը մենք այսօր դրել ենք այդտեղ հեկատվությունը սա ուրեմն հա շատ արդեն մաղազանք է որը գնում է մեր կառավարության կողմից ըստ ձեզ 320 փոքր հեկ իրականում կարող ենք մենք իրականացվել կամ այն 150-ը որը լիցենզիան արդեն տրված է պլյուս այդ 130 կանի եւ պլյուս 70 ըստ ձեզ մեր ռեսուրսները կբավականացնեն
Նա փորձեմ ձեր հարցը բաժանել երկու մասի, հա, երկու բաղադրիչի։ Մի հարցը վերաբերում է թե տեխնիկապես մենք կարող ենք այդքան կառուցել թե չէ, ու կա պոտենցիալ թե չէ, ենթադրում եմ, դա հանգիստ կարող եմ ասել այո, որտեղ կա պոտենցիալ։ Երկրորդ հարցը վերաբերում է այն կումուլյատիվ էֆեկտին, ենթադրում եմ, հա, եթե ճիշտ եմ հասկանում ձեր հարցը, որ եմ ասում քիչ առաջ խոսում եք։ Առաջինը պետք է ասեմ, որ ես էլեկտրիկ եմ մասնագիտությամբ, հա, ես բնապահպան չեմ, ոչ էլ ջրային ռեսուրսների մասնագետ եմ, so ինձ զերծ կպահեմ միանշանակ պատասխանելուց, բայց I'm with you on that, լուրջ, ես համաձայն եմ, որ կա խնդիր, հա, Տիգրան էլի IFC չէ, համաձայն եմ, որ կա խնդիր ու ես էլ եմ տեսնում այդ խնդիրը, հա, երբ որ ասենք Արամը, որ ասում էր, ես ընդեղ առաջ դուք եք որոն կապայս հետ, հիմա այդ կետը չկա, այդ սա հասկանում եմ, նույնիսկ էլ է շատ, դա հաճուկ, ցավագին, հա, այդ ընդունում եմ, որ տենց սիտուացիան է զոն, բայց ինձ թվում է պետք է բոլորով միասին փորձենք պայքարել, որպեսզի այդ ամեն ինչը փոխվի, ել եմ ասում, ոչ թե private sector-ի հետ, այլ decision maker-ների, policy-ի հետ, որովհետև եթե policy-ին թույլ է տալիս, ոնց կարող է մեկ private sector-ն ասել, չէ, մի աշխատող։ Ես գիտեմ, որ դու տեղից կարաս միլիոնատեր դառնաս, բայց մի դառ, էլի։ Ոնց ասես։
Ներդրումը դուք եք, չէ՞։
Ես ներդրում չեմ անում։
Խթանում եք, չէ՞։
Ես խթանում եմ ոչ մի դուք ինչ որ illegal բան տեսնում եք այստեղ։
Հացը illegal-ին չէ, վերաբերվում, հացը
moral
մորալ
բանն է վերաբերում հարցը։ Հաս մորալ точки
Ստացվում է, որ դուք ասացիք մենք ուզում ենք զարգացնել այդ մարքետը, հա, եւ փոքր եւ այդպես կոչված ես
մենք ուզում ենք զարգացնել ընդհանրապես վերականգնվող էներգետիկան։
Բայց ստացվում է, որ այդ սեկտորը սկսեց զարգանալ եւ լոբինգ անելով այդպիսի մի պրոյեկտներին եւ այդպիսի մի քաղաքականությանը, որ ընդհանրապես միայն եւ պատահական չի, որ այդ սեկտորը անցել է, ինչպես դուք եք գիտեք, մենք եք գիտենք, եւ մեր շատ հարուստ օլիգարխների եւ քանի որ մենք գիտենք այդ քանի կամպանիաներ, իրաց մեջքին մի մարդ է կանգնած։
Դրա համար ասեցի,
մեր մասը, այսինքն զարգացումը սկսել է ոչ թե զարգացում ապրել, այլ դրիվ
դեստրուկցիա։ Ես համաձայն եմ, դրա համար մի քիչ առաջ ասեցի, որ մենք մեր մասով փորձում ենք անել ամեն ինչ կարանք, որպեսզի չխթանենք այդ ավելի վատթարացում, այսինքն ոնց որ ասեցի, մեր environmental social էքսպերտները գալիս են, գնում են նայում են ամեն ինչ։ Պրոյեկտները ստուգում են մեզ report-ներ են արվում, construction-ի մասին մեզ report են անում։ Մեր environmental social standard-ները իրանց ուսուցում ենք, պարտադրում ենք, որ environmental social management system ներդնեն։ HSBC-ն այսօր Հայաստանում ունի ENS management system, որտեղ մենք իրանց պարտադրել ենք։ Ամերիկան ունի այսօր ENS management system, հա, որտեղ մեր պարտադրանքն ու մենք դա վերահսկում ենք եւ ստուգում ենք։ Բայց մեր ընդհանրապես 12 հատիկը։ Այսինքն մենք, ոնց ասեմ, անպագորգոր չունի, բայց մենք responsibility ենք կրում նրա համար, ինչ մենք անում ենք, հա մենք պատասխանատու ենք դրա։ Բայց այն ինչ կատարվում է դրանց դուրս
I think there is a very interesting challenge here, though. A very interesting challenge, how we use the resources offered by international organizations at the same time pursue a reasonable, sustainable environmental policy. It's to put everything on them and say, just because you're giving the money, therefore you're messing everything up, I think is going a little bit too far. On the other hand, I think they probably can play a more positive role in changing the environment policy in a more positive direction than they probably are doing at this point. You talk to individuals, they're with you, but the institutions are not, working in that direction. I mean, my criticism would be these international organizations could do more than they are, and the resources they bring are needed for the country to develop. It's how we all work together to channel these resources in the right direction. And I think the work NGOs do and the criticisms they bring are great because they push people to think their positions. Levan.
Շնորհակալություն նախ դուք երբ որ տալիս եք, ասենք ձեր կոնկրետ 12 պրոյեկտները, դուք այնտեղ օրինակ անում եք հետազոտություն, թե ինչքանով են իրենք ռացիոնալ օգտագործում ջրային ռեսուրսը, այսինքն ինչ տեխնոլոգիան օգտվում, ինչ գեներատոր, ինչ տուրբին եւ այլն, հետևում է, որտեղ ըստ էության մենք կարող է հիմա ունենանք ավելի շատ էլեկտրոէներգիա արտադրված, ավելի քիչ ռեսուրս օգտագործող, օրինակ մասնագետին, բայց զգում եմ, որ այդ ձև է իրականում, որտեղ մենք այդ ռեսուրսը սխալ ենք օգտագործում, այսինքն ոչ ճիշտ տեխնիկա ենք օգտագործում, արդյունավետ չենք որոնում։ Այդ դուք այդ պայմանը դնում եք այդ կառուցողի վրա, հա, որ ինքը արդյունավետ օգտագործի ռեսուրսը, ամենալավ տեխնոլոգիան ներդնի, հա, դնում եք թե չէ հետաքրքիր։
Ամենալավ չենք դրում, բայց դնում ենք, որ ամեն ինչը պետք է certified, ինչը ավտոմատически դուրս է մղում շատ վատ է պրոբլեմ։
Բայց միաժամանակ օրենքն էլ է պահանջում դա։ Այսինքն
օրենքը չի պահանջում, չէ՞։
Օրենքը չի պահանջում։
Չէ, համանդրության հոդված է ուղղակի, որը
միայն կոմիսիան կարա, երբ որ գալիս է նախագիծը իրանց մոտ construction license-ի համար, միայն կոմիսիան կարա նայի, ասի Ես ինչ
Ես ինչ ես
ես
ասում,
վեր 6 ամսվա ջրի վրա ես հաշվարկը կարի չէ, լավ, գնաց։ Բայց մի քիչ լավ ես խոսում, ասում եմ դե լավ։
Եկե մի հատ էլի կարճ հարցրի։ Միջին աշխով ինչքան ժամանակում է լինում հետ վերադարձը ներդրված գումարների, իհարկե մի քիչ
Փոքր հեկերի։
փոքր եկել, հա։ Միջին թիվը։
3 տարի, 3 տարին է։
8-10
Հիմա ես էլ փոքր ճարեի գտնեի։
8 ես գիտեմ 8-ից 10։
Առաջ մի 5-6 տարի առաջ երբ որ լավ հեկերն էին դեր, այսինքն հեշտ կառուցվող, հա, քիչ capex-ով, միջինը մի 5 capital expense։ Մի 5 տարվա կարգեր է ժամանակ։ Հիմա 8-ից 10։ Անկանում է։
Հա, դե
Մինչև երեխա ավարտի դպրոց։
Ընդ որում որ հարցնում եք developer-ին մի հիդրոէլեկտրոկայան էլի, այ չգիտեմ, Պողոս ջան, հա, Պողոսը էլի, ասում է երեխի թորներից համար, 15 տարին մասնի, payback կլեմ հաստատել, թորներից փոխ աշխատել։ Այս pension fund է, իհաց պարտադիր ուտակն է։
Ֆինանսական ռիսկերից ո՞ր կդադարեցնի ֆինանսավորումը։
Ով կդադարեցնի։ IFC-ն ցանկացած breach of contract, այսինքն մեր loan agreement-ի մեջ բավական քանակի պահանջներ կա, դա մենակ ֆինանսական, չֆինանսական եւ ամենավերջի բանը, որ մեզ հետաքրքրում է բարելավել։
Այսինքն կոնկրետ եթե ինչպես վնասներ սոցիալական կամ
Իհարկե, այնտեղ շատ ուժ խնդիրներ կարող են իրեկի հետ։ Դա համար եմ ասում, մեր environmental social supervision-ը բավական լուրջ է։
Նախադեպել է։
Հայաստանում դեռ չէ։ Դուրսը ով։
Եթե կարճ հարցավետեր
Հարց։
Հույսով, եթե ձեր մասնագետները որ պիտի գան evaluation team-ը, հույսով կրա, եթե ժամանակ անեն հրավիրենք հնարավորություն։
Հաճույքով ինձ մեզ պայմանավորել։
Well, thank you very much.